Good afternoon. We appreciate everybody participating today. I'm Chris Pratt, Vice President of Business Development for HORAN Emerging Business Advisors. Today's Grow Series event is titled Risky Business, you know, like the movie. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Grow Series is a living event intended to provide you, business leaders, with relevant and topical strategies to protect and grow your business. So we want this to be valuable for you, and today's event is going to focus specifically on risk management strategies tied to financial assets, data, intellectual property, and people management. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar with HORAN, I'm going to give you just a quick commercial because, well, number one, we welcome you, but we provide expert consulting to small and emerging businesses, not only in our community, but also nationally. We focus in the areas of employee benefits, wealth management, and executive benefits. And our mission is to provide our clients with the white glove experience of a boutique agency with also the leverage of HORAN's national influence and resources. So with that behind us, just a few housekeeping items, and I'll kick it over to Lauren. But everyone is muted, and thank goodness for that. I don't think I have to say anything more there, but we do want to hear from you. So please use the chat feature to post any questions that you might have, and we will do everything we can to answer those questions, time permitting. Second, today's session is being recorded, so everybody will have an opportunity to receive that recording probably within the next 24 to 48 hours. And then finally, please make sure you follow HORAN on social media. You can find us on Instagram, or the Gram as the kids call it, LinkedIn and Twitter, and I believe we're working on TikTok. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our Director of Operations, my right hand, our moderator as well for the Grow Series, Lauren Peter.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thanks to our clients, partners, and prospects who have joined us today for Risky Business. The goal of today's session is certainly not to scare you, because there are some pretty jaw-dropping statistics we will be sharing, but the goal is to supply you with information to help make your business better tomorrow than it is today. Before we get into our question-answer style discussion regarding the various risks small businesses face within the current landscape, I would like to allow both of our expert panelists to introduce themselves and provide a brief explanation of their background. We will start with Jonathan Theders from RiskSource. Jonathan?
Thanks, Lauren, and obviously HORAN and Chris and the whole team. I'm Jonathan Theders. I'm the CEO of RiskSource Clark Theders. RiskSource is in the insurance and risk management business. We are property casualty specialists, so you can think that we handle all the insurance coverages that HORAN doesn't. So we're like the perfect pair, because what they do great. On the opposite side of the spectrum, that's what we do is great. So it works out well. Cyber liability in particular has been a passion of mine since its first, creation 15 years ago. We helped write the first healthcare cyber liability form, went on to be endorsed by the American Hospital Association. I'm an accredited cyber risk advisor in partnership with Beyond Insurance and a syndicate of Lloyd's of London. And while I'm in the insurance business, it is my belief that insurance alone is never enough. I have seen a lot of really bad things happen to great people over my 22-year career. And those that engage in proactive risk management, being prepared, having a plan, training, adapting to that plan, always end up better than those that don't. So I thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. And let's turn it over to Michael Napier from our Wealth Management Department. Michael.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Mike Napier. I'm a wealth planner here at HORAN and a lead and a vice president in our wealth division. I typically work with individuals and families with their financial planning needs. My background is tax, estate planning, cash flow strategies, including Social Security and investments. And I also have a niche working with small business owners with succession strategies and benefits. So thank you, Lauren, and the entire HORAN Emerging Business Advisory team for coordinating this call. I think this will be fun.
Well, I agree. We will certainly try to do our best. So thanks for enlightening us, both of you, with your personalities. Let's get into some serious stuff, starting with cybersecurity. Prior to 2020, business leaders and employees alike trusted that our IT person or department took responsibility for protecting us. We were asked to be vigilant, but it was pretty limited to recognizing spam, most of which was quarantined by our junk mail filter. Enter 2020, 2021, and the number of cyber attack tactics and terminology I need to be aware of now looks like my weekly grocery list. Jonathan, while we ultimately have to eradicate all of these threats, what would you say are the best security measures for a business to protect today?
Absolutely. I mean, without a doubt, being prepared is the biggest part. And I say if there's 5 things that you can do, one, keep your security systems up to date. Sounds simple, but every bad act starts with attackers gaining access to business data. I think in the world that a lot of us are working remotely, working from home, there can be a tendency that some of these patches and updates don't happen as regularly as when you're in your own infrastructure. And so setting up controls and making sure that you're addressing those systems being up to date is great. Also, keeping up to date backups. Ransomware attacks, and I know we'll talk about this more in a little bit, that they're all about denying access to data or systems. We recommend that every business should at least be on daily backup at the very minimum. But if you can get to real-time backup, that is obviously the most ideal. And you have to think of some of these things. I know what we hear with our clients is the expense of some of these, but what you're really trying to do is mitigate the risk. And that is, getting your up-to-date backups is the most leverage you can possibly create to combat ransomware attacks. It gives you a lot more flexibility. Ransomware demands have increased from like $20,000 a few years ago to almost 200 today. So it's definitely impactful to business. The other thing is have a cyber incident response plan. So you and the people in the organization, no matter, they know what to do, and rather than scrambling at the moment that something bad happens, they can actually have a template and get things, into action. I'm happy to provide to anybody who would like it a free template, get you to the 95-yard line and let you run it in. So, and then performing cyber awareness training, phishing campaigns, rehearse things. We've all seen these various things come through, and you need to do some cyber awareness training. One question we ask a lot of our clients' employees, do they know what even protected information is? And a lot of people don't. They don't know what those things are. So even just letting them know where the important things lie is a great way just for them to understand how to protect it even more. And then lastly, just strongly consider cyber insurance. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it used to be expensive and very cumbersome and long applications, but now it is really robust. I mean, in most instances, if you're under $1 billion company, which I would imagine most of you, if not all of you are, it's 4 questions. I mean, it's very simple. So it brings a tremendous amount of value beyond just what you would think is traditional insurance.
Well, thank you. And honing in a bit more on cyber breaches, there are many different types. I've heard of things such as direct access, phishing, or attacks via third-party vendors, clients, or even social media. What is the most prevalent form of a cyber breach in your experience, and what is on the rise?
Yeah, well, the Information Systems Security Association, ISSA, that's all the IT guys and girls that are running at high levels. They've expressed that there's a 63% increase in attacks since the start of COVID. So it was already a huge problem, but now when you think, wow, it's even more. And I think we've all experienced a lot more. Phishing, without a doubt, is still the #1 cause of cyber loss. I would imagine that's going to hold true when the data for 2020 holds out. And phishing is, soliciting that private information in an attempt to fool someone into divulging something that's confidential information. And it could be, hey, I want to get your username or your password or your account information or credit card. Whatever it is, it's something that they're trying to gain personal identifying information and give you to release that to them. The other part that's a known continual problem is Office 365, Microsoft, and the takeovers there. Business email compromise. That would be somebody accessing using either they are, say, your HORAN, if you're looking at the HORAN website at the end and they just put a dash in between the letters, and it might look exactly the same, but it's not, and they confuse somebody that's a regular person you're doing business with into something else. And so then they get very creative. I'll give you an example that happened 2 days ago to someone, and I almost fell victim to clicking into this, but a trusted partner of mine that I was actually waiting on something sent me an email. It said, please download this information, and it was confidential, so I was expecting it, but it asked me to put in my Microsoft 365 credentials. And that is not normal. There are times when you have to put in like a specialty type of application, but nobody ever asks for Microsoft 365. So just a common thing, if you're ever asked, then you need to ask yourself another question. Well, I emailed back to my contact and said, is this legitimate? And immediately I got a note, yes, it is. Thank you for checking. It is legitimate. Please proceed to open. And I went back and I thought, this is not right. So I called him and I said, did you do this? And he said, no, my email's been hacked. And so it was not them. And they were actually in his actual email. So it was not a spoofed email. They were literally set up rules and created some things. So you really have to be diligent. And when things don't seem right, ask the question, slow down. The biggest thing too that you can protect yourself against things like this is multi-factor authentication. You'll hear the term MFA, but that's where it sends your cell phone a link to put in some numbers. It started out as probably an extra little frustration in life that has slowed you down. Now it's become a lot more common, but I would definitely suggest choosing vendors and applications that offer it. It is a really, really, really important way to protect yourself. So from those. And then what we're also seeing as a new trend is cyber breaches involving our vendors. We're constantly outsourcing a lot of our IT technology. It makes sense. A lot of times they do have better controls and their costs can be better and all of that. But you have to understand that your data is your data, and you become vulnerable on their breach. So you may not actually have anything, but you could have a significant business interruption. And so just understanding what those impacts could be. And if you do buy insurance or you consider buying insurance, what you want to look for is they'll use a couple different words, but it'll be either a contingent business interruption or a contingent liability coverage or dependent. So there's some interchangeable words. That contingent and dependent is those third-party people that you implore. Not covered by all insurance. It is become much more commonplace, but look for that because it can be the protection for you that you need.
Well, thank you. And yeah, likewise, a few weeks ago, we got a request for proposal from a client, and obviously first knee-jerk reaction is, oh gosh, we're in jeopardy with the client, need to respond, but it said, hurry, need to respond in 24 hours. And we sort of thought, that is not the typical with these sorts of things. So we have a fundamental at HORAN, which is when in doubt, communicate personally. So that's exactly what we did. We picked up the phone, got to the bottom of it. That person was actually on the phone with their cyber insurance agent at that very moment. So again, this is just happening everywhere. And I think with that, I'm going to launch into, we're doing some polling today. I think it's a good time to launch this first question. So we will start with something pretty simple. As you can see, it's a yes, no, or unsure answer. So the question is, has your business been victim to an attempted cyber attack in the past 6 months? So go ahead and please answer now. We'll go ahead and give a little bit of time to respond. And again, this doesn't mean that they actually broke through, but has there been an attempt? And I'm interested to just see how this comes out. I'm going to answer myself based on my own experience. Okay. Hopefully most folks have responded. Chris, do you want to go ahead and share the results? Waiting for those to pop up here. So our results are 8 out of 23 respondents. That's about 35% did say yes. A handful, just a few people said no, and then also a handful that said unsure. So, but again, I mean, of those that responded, the majority did experience some sort of attempted attack. So, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. Well, actually, I'm going to share some statistics. So, in terms of those statistics, now, granted, these are things that I'm not going to give a lot of intel or insight into these statistics. I merely collected these because, again, I am not the expert here. But you can see where these were acquired from. So first, I want to kind of tap into what the total cost is of a data breach. And where we've sourced this information, it's around $4 million. Out of that, since this was an international survey, the USA was the highest cost country, averaging $8.6 million. So that's pretty staggering right there. And then we went a step further and broke it down by a few industries. So the healthcare industry around 7 million, finance 5.9, retail at 2 million, and then finally the public sector at 1 million. Do note with some of these kind of sub-bullets that this did account for the detection, notification, post-response, and not to get away from this, but the lost business as a result of a breach. The largest cost was actually due to lost business at 1.5 million. And we also took a little further look at small businesses versus large companies. Now do note, those that factored in a small business within the survey were those with less than 500 employees at about 2.4 million versus those that were large employers at over 10,000 employees, $4.6 million in losses. And then finally, cyber insurance did cover the cost of the legal services and restitution to victims in most of these cases. And Jonathan mentioned how important it is to have that. We're going to talk about that a little bit further along in our conversation. So outside of cost, we dove into some of the root causes, and to give you a breakdown based on these survey statistics, malicious attacks or criminals were accounting for 52% of the cyber breaches. Human error, basically just negligence, general negligence, 23%. And then finally, system glitches or errors within internal hardware, software was 25%. Again, in terms of the cost, translate that, malicious attacks averaged 4.3 million. 19% of those were caused by compromised credentials. So again, getting access to people's passwords and things and getting in that way. 80% did involve customer personally identifiable information. So again, information within your database of your clients being circulated out to the masses. And then 32% involved intellectual property. So again, I think that is pretty intuitive. And then next slide addresses the amount of time involved with these breaches. So 280 days to detect and contain a breach. And out of that, the longer amount of time was just identifying it at 207 days versus 73 days to contain. Do note that this does not include any of that post-containment time that it requires to restore the lost clients as a result of the breach. And then 15% of costs were incurred 2 or more years post-breach. So again, it's the impact lasts a very, very long time is what this is highlighting. And then we did, of course, Jonathan touched a little bit on COVID-19 or the pandemic and the impact that this has had, because again, a large number of companies did go to remote work. 54% of organizations did require remote work as a result of the pandemic. And 76% indicated there was an increase in time to identify and contain a breach as a result of that. And then 70% expected an increase in cost tied to a breach related to remote working. So again, this is a real problem. We, of course, want to be able to give our employees the ability to access all of our security measures that we put in place as a business when they're working in the office for us, but perhaps their home computers don't always have those capabilities or capabilities to get that in their hands. So, again, moving on, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Jonathan and ask some questions once again. I've heard the term used, bad actor. That's used fairly frequently, and I like to make a little bit of a joke here. I think it's most of the cast members of the Mystery Science Theater 3000 films. I know that's not correct, but they're really bad actors. Let's face it, if you've ever seen one of those.
Yeah.
But in the cyber breach sense, who are these bad actors and why are they so dangerous?
Well, there certainly are bad actors, and that is the general term given to them, which is you'll hear that often. These can be individuals. I mean, it could be the one-off. It could be the rogue employee that's frustrated with their employer and wants to take something out when it is. And it can be sophisticated rings and even organized by federal governments. Some of the foreign governments would maybe say not, wink, wink, but certainly, there influences there. Using ransomware as an example, similar to an artist, each bad actor has their signature, their style, their fingerprint. Whether that's North Korea's Lazarus Group or Iranian actors responsible for the SamSam attack, Russian developer CryptoLocker. There's a ton of these things out here. You even have hacktivists. That's a terminology that you may hear that are bad actors that are hackers with a social agenda. They want to push. It's not necessarily just to push their agenda along. They can have names and they have that style. It's just everyone, they kind of know who it is. This has caused some significant issues in late, and I'll kind of draw attention because a lot of people aren't aware, but the Department of Treasury, the Office of Foreign Assets, OFAC, they call it, in October 1st, ironically, they put out a memorandum, and essentially the advisory stated that a payment of ransom to these organizations could be identified as a contribution to a terrorist organization. Some of these are known terrorist organizations. And so for instance of ransomware, that would be somebody shutting down your system. We're seeing a huge increase in manufacturing where they break in and they shut down manufacturing plants and equipment. So they can lock that up and say, hey, if you pay me $50,000 or $20,000 worth of Bitcoin or $200,000, whatever it is, I'll release this to you. And 90% of the time they actually do. But what the government is saying now is that potentially if you are giving that ransom to that bad actor, they may consider that a violation of U.S. Federal law. That could be a real problem because it could affect your business and so on and so forth. Now, from an insurance perspective, most of the insurance products are providing ransomware coverage. They'll pay those ransoms for you. And so it's caused a pullback. Some insurance companies are not covering it anymore. They're lowering their limit. For the first time in the last 6 months, we're actually seeing a decrease in the ransomware claims. And I think some of that is these bad actors realize they push the envelope too much. And because it's so expensive that the government's getting involved. If they actually went back to these $30,000, $40,000 ones, it might not cause as much part. So, but there are a lot of reasons to be nervous about this. I mean, if you did say you were a company and you were found victim to contributing to a terrorist organization, I mean, think of the PR, the penalties. I mean, it would be horrific. And so really pay attention, understand if you do buy insurance, understand how they change because they are bringing in some lower limits. And then the biggest thing, to go back from the biggest thing from the very beginning, is just back up and be prepared. Back up your systems because if you only have to give up a half a day's worth of work and get back up and running in the moment, it's a whole lot easier than wishing, oh shoot, we haven't had a week's worth of work. I'm going to have to pay this ransom to get hopefully back up and running.
Absolutely. And we're still waiting to get to cyber insurance, but I've got one more question beforehand. So early on, I mentioned that it's not IT alone that plays a part in protecting a company's cybersecurity. So even though they may not be technical experts, what role should the CEO or leadership team play when it comes to technology?
For sure, and I'm never a huge fan of starts with the top, that phrase. I think it gets overused, but it really does. I mean, I've dealt with dozens and dozens of claims under cyber liability insurance. Some that they didn't have it, and I helped them through. most of which they had it. And 100% of the time, the CEO gets involved at that time, mostly under panic, some under the concern. If they have an outside board of directors, the board of directors always gets involved, and there can be multiple ideas of how to approach things. And so I would always say is it's not the ideal time to figure out what to do, especially with an emotional CEO leadership team that's trying to figure things out on the fly. So the CEO should be involved, approve the cyber incident response plan. He or she should follow the same rules, training, etiquette as everybody else. You got to lead from the top. And they are frankly targeted more by their position. So, it's important for them to have as much due diligence as possible. So the plan will always benefit you, keep the CEO in control, and keep the business moving forward. And I think that's the biggest part.
Well, excellent. So I feel like we're relatively educated in this short amount of time on what we should be watching out for and some of the responsiveness actions a business should take. So let's assume I've updated my internal policies, I have a prevention and response plan in place, and I've taken the time to educate my employees. Why should I be interested in purchasing cyber insurance? And what type of risk manager should I seek to provide that?
For sure. So I think even large companies are not going to have enough breaches to be technical experts on cyber breaches. They're highly impactful when they do occur, but they're not going to be an everyday occurrence. And so what insurance gives you is the protection. So it is that first party and third party indemnification, like things that you're normal that you buy other insurance for. So that is a part of it. It also is the business interruption, just like if you had a fire in your building and you couldn't operate, it would replace the lost revenue during your downtime. All of that is really great. But more importantly, it's the fulfillment of all your legal obligations. There are so many different unique state requirements. If you, like for instance, personal health or personal identifying information, the PII, in California, that includes a zip code, something that actually you put on a letter. So, you could have a triggering thing in California that's something in Ohio we just don't even think about. And so you have a law firm that's attached to your policy that knows and understands all those international and state laws. It comes with a full breach response team. So you got your public relations firm, your crisis response team, your breach coach. All of those people are included in the insurance or should be included in the insurance. The forensic IT and accounting firms to figure out what happens. All these things are really expensive, and it's a great way to outsource, all those firms that have been vetted and appreciated and can do. I do say that there are sometimes people have relationships, and they might have a forensic accounting firm or an IT firm that they really want to use. You can usually get those approved. You want to get them approved before you have a claim. So if you can negotiate that with your insurer, and most of the time, unless they've had really bad experience with them, you can get those added. But just think of it as it's a retainer. You're putting all of these great resources on a retainer. And then what's even kind of neat about where this coverage is going is that some insurance companies are actually doing real-time alerts on vulnerabilities of your system. They're actually 24 hours, 7 days a week, looking for vulnerabilities that a hacker might infiltrate and sending you in real time an alert that says, come fix this. On some insurance companies, they'll monitor your key vendors. So you can give them a list of their vendors that are critical to your infrastructure. And on a regular basis, they'll be watching those and giving you insights. So I really like to say it's more than insurance. It's insurance part is a big piece, but also think of all the other resources that come with it.
Absolutely. Well, certainly a breach of any kind is difficult to cope with, whether we imagine what it would be like or actually face it head on. And before I come back to you for some closing thoughts, because we need to give Michael his time as well this morning. Again, it's just, I know brain is exploding with all of this stuff, but I'd like to do another polling question. So with that being said, our question is, based on everything you just heard, how prepared do you feel your business is in preventing, recognizing, or recovering from a cyber breach? Do you feel like you're extremely prepared? Do you feel like you're somewhat prepared? identified several risks that you must address soon, or just absolutely no preparation. Here's the key, come on in, our data is yours. So go ahead and supply your answer now. We'll, again, just like the last one, give everyone time to absorb and think through. Again, I'm going to answer on behalf of my organization. I might be somewhat confident here, but I feel like we've got a pretty great team. Okay, so let's go ahead and close it out. Poll has ended and waiting for those results. Waiting on bated breath. Very exciting stuff. Okay, so, and good, we had a few more participants this time than the last one. Okay, so we have 6 out of 23 respondents who said they were extremely prepared. 7 out of 23 somewhat prepared. Again, it sounds like, Jonathan, you have perhaps enlightened some folks with some additional risks that they must address very soon. And good. I think that's very, very good that we have 0 respondents that said there is no preparation. So I think doing something is better than doing nothing, for sure. So basically, bottom line, as Jonathan stated before, preparation is key. And if you are prepared, you will get through it. Jonathan, do you have any sort of perhaps uplifting closing thoughts before I begin grilling Michael?
Yeah, uplifting and cyber liability. So no, I always remember a teacher in high school, probably likely when I didn't turn in my homework or something, say prior planning prevents poor performance. And while these are all scary situations, you can and will be okay. We say, a cyber breach is not the end of the world, but mishandling it is. And so like, it's just, things can happen, but focus on what you can control, seek to understand what you can't, but be prepared. And I appreciate the opportunity to share, and obviously you'll be available if anybody has any specific issues they want to discuss. I'm always here to help in any way. Thanks, Lauren.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, well, let's go ahead and move over to Michael now. So we've taken a deeper dive on some of the, I guess, external disruptive forces that could impact your business. But let's spend some time discussing the financial risks you could be exposed to inside the doors, inside the organization. So turning to Michael on this one, risk management, clearly a broad subject, and we could go in several different directions. So kind of from 1,000 feet up, what is the most important area of mitigating financial risk?
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Wish I had a cool background like Jonathan, but it was really cool. Really good stuff there. So we'll be talking about like the people aspect of risk mitigation. And 1,000 feet up, there's a lot we could go with here. I'll start by mentioning that COVID-19 has drastically altered the course and the mindset of the business owner and the entrepreneur. So it was a tough year last year, especially for the business owner. Facebook actually surveyed 86,000 small business owners at the end of 2020. It was in November. These were small business owners. A third of them said they had to close their doors because of the pandemic and lost revenue. And the ones that made it through, majority of them said they're suffering burnout right now, personal burnout through just cranking through and making changes from last year. So I think we all understand the whole risk reward concept of owning a business, and business owners and entrepreneurs are thinking, how can my business improve my life? I think at this point, and I'm hearing, what is the state of the industry that I'm in? And how can I capitalize on my business? Should I be making acquisitions? Should I be selling my assets? Last year was the ultimate stress test for this. Some of the other risks, liquidity risks, and making short-term debt obligations, operational risk. So the failure of internal processes and people and systems. And I would think that the majority on this call with COVID, most companies were shutting the doors back in April and March and April of last year. So we had time and short period of time to really firm up the processes. I know at HORAN, we were prepared for it on going remote. And when we got into it, I think just like other businesses, we continue to improve the process and the operational risk. So I think for most of us, COVID really sped that process up. The last is credit risk, defaulting on debt, or is the other one that's out there. So I could go on and on with this question, Lauren, but I will stop there.
Okay, well, you one of the first things you did mention was the business owner. So specific to that individual, why is it important to have a solid succession plan and what is involved?
Okay, good question. So, and I'm going to twist the COVID right back into my answer on this one, but family businesses are particularly vulnerable to this pandemic and its effects, but 58% of family-run businesses do not have a succession plan, and it's the same, relatively same number for just privately held businesses. So the majority of us do not have a succession plan in place. And when business owners call me to talk about the succession plan, they typically call me and say, I'm quote, getting older, and that's why I need to start establishing my plan. So when entrepreneurs start companies, I don't think they necessarily think about the day they might actually leave the company. And a plan must be in place. It takes a while to get a plan together. And this isn't just for the business owner, but the same goes for the executives and the key employees inside the business. So the top management, the top salesperson, the top account managers, all those people need an exit strategy as well. Sometimes just as important as the owner. You would think the number one reason business owners are worried about succession is to eventually have the big payday, the big payday to retire. And I think that's true in many cases, but the studying that I've done and the conversations I've had is that defining a legacy is just as important as the big payday and if that's the case, and the retirement. So defining a legacy is just as important because entrepreneurs and business leaders want to see their businesses continue when they eventually step out of it. So what's involved in creating a succession plan? I think the obvious is identifying the successor or successors, but the other and most important and somewhat important is the concept of funding that eventual buyout. So who's going to be able to afford to buy my stock when I step down? And so some companies do it through kind of enhancing the profitability of the company. So the thought is if I can raise the profitability of my company, maybe the cash flow, the increased cash flow over a certain amount of time might be able to help pay out and help buy up the stock of myself or the other shareholders, but also setting up buy-sell agreements. Sometimes is funded by insurance and bank notes, so bank loans and employee stock option, ESOP type plans and deferred comp. So, but all of those avenues there takes time to fund them. And so planning is needed well in advance for any buyout. It just takes time essentially to raise the cash and to start the strategy. So I think starting this conversation with your corporate accountant, with your corporate attorney, someone who's involved in these types of planning, or your wealth advisor, or even a mentor of some sorts, associations as well, like the Gehring Center, it probably makes the most sense to get started there.
Yeah, well, and I heard you loud and clear in that it's don't wait, you have to anticipate the need. So the time is now to start that process. And in both personal conversations and at HORAN company meetings, our beloved Terry HORAN has always stated that a company's most valuable asset is their people. The people, in a sense, keep the lights on and the doors open. I'm certain many business leaders feel the same way. So with that, before we move on to your next question, I would like to do our next polling question. So, all right, what is the most significant impact the loss of a key employee could have on your business? Would it be revenue loss? Could it actually affect your business continuity? Or would you actually be at risk to lose some of your clients or staff due to that loyalty being in place? So again, we'll give maybe about 15, 20 more seconds to answer. Once again, I'm going to insert my thoughts into the process as well. If you can't participate, what's the point? So I've put my thought in. We'll give about 5 more seconds. Okay. Poll has ended. And once again, drum roll for the results. I won't actually do it. Okay. So we have basically just a few, about 5% that said revenue loss would be a factor. I would say about 15% said business continuity. And then the highest number, about 7 of our respondents out of those involved, so maybe about 20% did indicate that they could potentially lose clients and or staff if someone left their organization. All right, so certainly I guess that's a good segue into the next couple of questions here. So at the risk of a key employee becoming disabled, ill, or passing away, how can a company protect the contributions made by their key talent?
Okay, and that last polling question was interesting. It's one of those, I wish it was a D, all the above. I think they're all very important. And that's a good question about the key talent. And a lot of this is, and you can go several different directions on this. I'll focus on the insurance side of it. Purchasing insurance or other risk mitigation insurance to lessen the risk on it. The loss of a key employee, whether it be a founder or a CFO or a top sales rep, all of those people, the loss of a key employee could be fatal to organization. So I think most of us on this call have probably heard of key person insurance, and that's a form of business-to-business insurance that will help a company survive if a critical employee dies prematurely. So the policy proceeds are typically owned by the company, and they can be used to pay off the firm's debt or to cover its overhead costs if that were to happen, but also in case of a shareholder of some sort, to pay back the widow or widower or family involved if that were to happen. I had a client was 6-7 years ago who was a partner of a small business, and this client, it was a construction company, wasn't in town here, but the person passed away 6 or 7 years ago, and unexpectedly in his mid-40s. And so he was a partner. He was married and had a teenage son. And this was a newly formed company on the most part, like 6 years old. But they had done their job. They had done their work on this. And the company actually bought a $2 million life insurance policy on him and the other 2 partners and drafted the buy-sell agreement on that. So when this person passed away, there wasn't a whole lot of financial burden on the company to pay this executive out. And so the company was able to get the proceeds, pay it to the widow or widower to cover that expense. So it's a really good, smart way of doing it. And these insurance policies, in this case, it didn't cost a whole lot of money to get this done. It was just something that needed to be done and kind of go through the application and kind of sometimes a headache of getting insurance. So that's pretty much the key person insurance. Disability is something also we need to keep in mind here. If you lose an employee due to a disability, and so the person can no longer work for some reason, you can purchase key person disability insurance, very similar to what I just talked about there on the key man insurance or the key person insurance for disability. So disability would help provide cash flow to the company in the event that a key person couldn't work for some reason. It could also defray the cost of hiring a replacement employee or recruitment, training, startup costs, loss of revenue, and those types of things. So if your organization doesn't have that set up, those are pretty easy things to do. And so you're working with typically your corporate attorney to do it and some kind of insurance executive to get that done. So good question, Lauren.
Yeah, so, obviously a lot of those instances that you just mentioned covered unanticipated events that could impact the loss of a key employee and the insurance policies that you could put in place to protect the business. But what are the things a company can do to control the risk of losing their key talent if an individual were to choose to leave the organization voluntarily?
That's a good question too. So, and this is more kind of an exciting answer, I guess, and especially for the key talent in the organization, to try to keep them at the organization. I think some of it has to do with, empowering that employee and letting that employee run with their talents and whatnot internally, but also some things financially speaking. You've got 3 or 4 ways of doing it. Stock options is one way, and I've seen it in small business settings before. And so not just the big companies, not the big Krogers and the P&Gs, but I've seen the stock options work, and even a private organization. So you're rewarding the senior managers and the key employees to align their interests with the company. And so you're giving the employees a right to buy a certain amount of shares at a lower cost, assuming that the price goes up down the road. So that's one way of doing it. The one I see mostly with the small businesses is to do some kind of deferred compensation plan. And so this would be something you would work with someone like myself or someone, an attorney, to draft up. But a deferred comp really rewards long term. It gives a long term reward to provide key employees with a further incentive to remain with the company longer. And so it doesn't have to be linked to equity. It can be linked with a payment of some sorts. And I've seen these things in small companies and large companies. Some hospitals around here have these as well. I've seen them linked to, okay, if you leave the organization, you go to a competitor, you can have some kind of golden handcuffs tied to deferred comp plan. So if you go to a competitor within 2 years of leaving, you miss all this money. So some of this money could be equity, it could be in insurance policies, it could be in brokerage accounts, those types of things. So, and that's a pretty easy way of setting something up. It just takes time for it to kind of run its course. Finally, the equity participation. So, stock, giving true ownership or selling true ownership to a key employee. So it aligns their interests. But on top of that, I know many companies that reward their employees, maybe not with the equity participation, but you can do an equity participation linked to the appreciation of the company's stock value, not giving the ownership, but giving a note that's saying if the valuation goes up over a certain amount of time, you can get a certain percent of the valuation. So I see this in some of like the junior upcoming type superstars in companies, people doing kind of that way instead. So, and again, those are pretty easy to set up, and it's working with a corporate attorney to get that all drafted. Finally, and if you talk to any like business valuators or corporate attorneys, they're going to say, hey, on the flip side of kind of helping the employee as an employer, you got to make sure you secure those non-competes and non-solicit agreements. And sometimes you can tie those incentives I just talked about inside of those. So you're protecting your business by having all key employees signing non-competes, non-solicited agreements. And so it'll restrict employees for leaving the firm and competing against your business over a certain amount of time in geographic areas. But when you're going to sell your business, the valuation goes way up when you have those types of plans in place.
Well, thank you, Michael. This has all been wonderful. And I think we're getting somewhat close to the end of our time today. And not to continue to put you on the spot, but do you have any closing thoughts from the wealth department on the outlook for businesses in 2021? And the next question is, can you keep it non-political? I'm actually kidding.
No. So thank you, Lauren. Yeah, the closing thoughts, our final thought from our wealth department, our wealth team. It's been quite a year, 12 months. I guess we're on 11 months right now. So COVID and civil unrest and new political administrations. And but with that said, as far as, the stock market's rallied really well around that. The Dow's at an all-time high right now as of yesterday, which is amazing. And so we're positive with the long-term growth in the market and the economy. Vaccines are being distributed. Now, of course, all that's great news. Yet, seems that valuation on companies are very high right now on the most part, especially in the public sector. And so, just be cautious out there. And I wouldn't be surprised in the next year or so if we start seeing some tax law changes and some other regulatory changes on retirement plans and healthcare and insurance. So keep your eyes open and go cautiously moving forward. But we overall feel very positive about 2021 and economic growth. And thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you. Well, great. And I'm keeping the positivity as well. And which is why, as we kind of come to an end here, I'd like to end our presentation on a positive note, which I think we at least successfully accomplished with both of our panelists. So to continue that good energy, I would like to throw out one final polling question. I think it's a little important to insert fun into our workday. So this final question is kind of stepping away from this cyber security and risk management topic. What are you most looking forward to post-pandemic, which is hopefully sometime this year in 2021? Would it be going on a destination vacation? Would it be gathering with close friends or extended family? Would it be attending a live concert or performance? Is it ditching your mask and shaking hands or hugging people? Or finally, is it nothing? You love your me time, you love your alone time, you're kind of good with things continuing as they have. So once again, take a little bit of time. And I know this one's a little difficult to choose, I agree, because there's probably lots of things we want to be doing and have been wanting to do for the last several months, but which stands out to you? All right, so we have ended the poll. And again, anxiously awaiting those results. All right, so we have about 6 individuals. Actually, the majority of those that did answer did say going on that destination vacation. So perhaps, again, not any sort of legal or consulting advice, but maybe invest in Airbnb because I think a lot of people are going to be traveling this year. So again, lots of fun. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and once again, thank everyone for your attendance today, as well as the expertise of Jonathan and Michael. As stated before, feel free to submit any questions you have into the chat box or the Q&A. We'll make sure those get over to me. And likewise, if there's a topic you would like us to consider for the next episode of our Grow series, throw that in the chat as well, or feel free to reach out to your HORAN Emerging Business Advisors team directly to submit your ideas. We would love to cover it. So I'm actually going to take a look at the chat as I did notice a question come in a little bit earlier. And this is directed to Jonathan. So Jonathan, are there specific designations to consider for IT professionals when hiring or looking at outsourced services? Is that something you're able to answer?
I am sure that there are. But I don't know a lot of those acronyms from what they are. But yeah, there are lots of certifications. So whether or not it's an IT firm, I mean, what you want to do is you want to really look at if you're going to hire your own people. Just make sure that they have lots of experience with it. It's one thing to have a website that says you do some cyber security coaching, but then to actually understand what the depth of that is. And then from a standpoint of just on the insurance, because a lot of that stuff comes with it. And I saw one thing that Ray had put out here was just what do people know when they get breached? How do they know what to do? And a lot of that, I mean, even like one of our insurance companies, they give you an app. And you say you have a breach and it turns on a breach coach in real live time, and you go walk around your office and they show you exactly what they do and you're giving you real life, real time advice in the moment. So there's a lot of really good resources. I would just talk to your broker and have those conversations with them, or have those with me. I'm always open, obviously, for that. So to have those discussions.
And I was going to mention too, again, I'm going to highlight this sort of in my closing thoughts, but one of HORAN's strategic partners is Strategic HR. They have an entire recruiting arm. So if you are looking to bring them in for some project work to help with recruiting a specific type of role, we can make that connection for you and facilitate a warm introduction. So just let us know. I do not see any other questions that have come through. So given that we are about 5 minutes until the end of the lunch hour, I'll go ahead and close it out here. So the next event in our Grow series will occur in early June. Our goal with the Grow series is to focus on content that impacts the here and now for you and your business, while also seeking creative ways to engage our audience, such as virtual breakout sessions, client spotlights, and polling questions like we did today. We don't just want to be another webinar, but we want to try to stand out from the crowd. Finally, HORAN Emerging Business Advisors has created a regional network of best-in-class partners to fulfill all of your business needs and to help you thrive and grow. Whether it's Jonathan from RiskSource, or Michael from our wealth management team, or one of our past or even future panelists yet to be determined, we want to help you position your business for success in any way that we can. So we hope to see you again in June. And in the meantime, have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for joining us.